Hey everybody, Dean here, and this is the Dean Rothstein podcast. This is on my YouTube channel. Also, you can check me out on Instagram at Dean Rothstein and on TikTok at Dean Rothstein as well. And that's where you can pick up my weekly messages. And you can also go to podbean.com and you can pick up my podcast. That's a non-video podcast, by the way, on Podbean. Oh, and also, big news, we're on Spotify now. So if you do have a Spotify account, just go onto Spotify and search my name, the Dean Rothstein podcast, and it'll pop up on Spotify. So we're excited that we're on Spotify, and things are going in the right direction with this podcast. It's interesting. When I started the TikTok messages and the Instagram messages over, I think it's about at least maybe a year and a half ago, I knew absolutely nothing. My daughter actually used to make fun of me and go, "Dad, what are you doing? You're subscribing to yourself." That's how I didn't even know what I was doing. But the thing about it was God ordained. The Lord had made it clear to me that that was something He wanted me to do, and today, we get close to 2,000 views, and I don't even know who's watching it, but I pray and hope that it's changing lives, and that is ultimately what this is about: is to change people's lives. I call it the Dean Rothstein podcast, keeping it real as we follow Jesus through life's events, because that's really what it is. It's about being real and following Jesus. You probably hear Parker, my little dog, barking. He always gets upset when if we're on the phone. So if you hear barking in the background, look, you know that this is real. We're outside. We're sitting in the backyard. The little guy is, I think he's choking right now. Joanne's trying to get him to go in the house, so to keep him happy. But anyway, it's a beautiful day here in Arizona. It was like 75 degrees, absolutely gorgeous. It's great to be sitting outside and doing this, because obviously with the weather as beautiful as it is, it's great to be outside. So, first of all, just want to thank all of you. You can subscribe to this podcast through YouTube. Just hit the subscribe button, and you'll get all the updates when I put out a new podcast and a new YouTube TV channel. Hopefully, I'll figure out how to merge the video with the podcasting and get it all down to one. But right now, we have just the talk podcast, no video, on podbean.com. and also on Spotify. And then if you want to see the video channel part, that's on YouTube, which is everybody has, and that's nice and easy. All right, so let's get going. So, I always talk about following Jesus and how important that is to follow Jesus. And one of the reasons why I speak about that in a real sense, in a daily sense, is because you never know what's going to happen. Case in point, just this past week with the tragic airplane crashes that occurred, first over the Potomac and then in Philadelphia. And my heart goes out to these people, who lost their loved ones. It's an absolute tragedy. And I know what it's like because I've lived through it. I've lived through that tragedy of, a loved one not coming home, or dying tragically. When my son passed away last year in July, this was totally unexpected. And when those tragedies hit, it rocks you right to your core. I basically was in a fog for, close to, 6 months. I'm still in a fog. But the fog is better. It's been lifted because I'm following Jesus. because I put my full faith and trust in God. Does that mean it was easy? No, absolutely not. It's been a horrible, horrible time in one sense, but in the other sense, it's been wonderful because I've seen God work in my life. When I step back now and I look, I can see where God was along the way. Not only in my life, but in the life of my wife, my daughter, the people around us. God brought all these people around us that I didn't even know were out there. And every single one of them was there to help, to give advice, to help us, to be praying for us, just a whole bunch of things just to help get us through the tragedy of Brandon passing away tragically. And so when this occurs, it actually does strengthen your faith. Is it fair? No, absolutely not. It's not fair Brandon died. It's totally unfair. And it's unfair that those people died in, the plane crash of the helicopter and then the other plane in Philly. It's totally unfair. That's all I can say. It's not right. It's unfair. But it happens. And it not only happens to us, over 6 months ago, but it's happening every single day. Tragedies hit every single day. And that's why it's so important to be grounded in your faith. That's why it's so important to have Jesus as your anchor. Because we never ever know what's going to happen. We have no idea what tomorrow will bring. I don't even know what the next 10 minutes are going to bring, let alone tomorrow. And God makes it clear. Live one day at a time. It's interesting. You go to, support group meetings, AA, Gamblers Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and I've been to all these meetings. Because I'm helping these people all the time, so I want to get an idea of what's going on. And one of the things you always hear is about living your day one day at a time. Yes, we need to make plans for the future, and we want to have plans for the future. But it's most importantly to live that one day at a time moniker. It's so much easier. It takes so much stress off of you when you're living one day at a time. And especially when the tragedy hit, when Brandon passed away. I wasn't at one day at a time. I was lucky I was at 30 seconds at a time. But 30 seconds at a time becomes a minute. And then a minute becomes 5, and 5 becomes 10, and 10 becomes 20, and 20 becomes 40, and 40 becomes 60. Next thing you know, you're living one day at a time. And living one day at a time, just it took off all that pressure. All the pressures around me. Your bills, your relationships, everything. Just narrowed it right down to one day at a time. And it allowed me to get back to a point of being able to function. One of the other things I did was I made sure that I was active. When the tragedy hit, the next day, quite frankly, I went to the gym. And I've been going to the gym ever since. I've been going to the gym since I'm like 20 years old. And I absolutely love lifting weights and I love working out. And I still do it to this day. And I made sure that I continued on that routine. As tough as it was to go there. And believe me, when I was at the gym, man, I had tears in my eyes every day. Every day I was there. If I was listening to a song, I'd start crying. If I was working out, I was crying. But I made sure that I continued on that routine. And also, I took my time. I took my time through the process. I didn't rush it. And that's the other thing about following Jesus. God doesn't want us to rush it. We don't have to rush. This is not a race. It's a marathon. Paul talks about it. Run the race. But that race is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And by understanding that and taking my time each and every day, I got better, a little bit better. I don't know if it's better or if it's more being able to function, but each and every day I started to be able to do that. So that's what it means to be following Jesus when you're hit with these type of tragedies. You have to step back. You got to ask God for help. Man, I was asking for help all the time. All the time. I don't know if God heard it or didn't hear it. I'm sure he heard it. But I was asking for help every single day. Probably 100 times a day. And I knew that God would never get tired of hearing me ask for help. Because he's a loving, caring God. Remember, God is not a religious being. We're not talking about religion here. We're talking about how God transforms us. He's a God of transformation. And even in tragedies, we're transformed. It's a transformation. It's not about religion. It's not about showing up every Sunday at church and checking a box. But it's understanding where your heart is. And where your heart is, that's where everything is. And that's why I say God is not a religious being. He's a God of transformation. And God knew. He knew exactly what was going to happen that day on July 22nd. My wife and I, we were just talking about it. And we said that there was no surprise to God. God set everything up. He knew everything that was going to occur that day. Nothing's out of his realm. And he knew that by taking Brandon home, Brandon's life was fulfilled. Brandon ended well. Yes, he died of a drug overdose, but he ended well. And why do I say that? Because at the end, he had an apartment, a roof over his head, a dog, he had food, he had a job, he was helping people. It's just that life got too big for him, and he didn't know how to handle that. And that's the mental illness that he struggled with. So yes, in the end, does he die a tragic death? Yes, 100%. But God takes him home because he says to him, Brandon, well done, thy good and faithful servant. You've finished well. Come home, have that eternal rest. And then God says to Joanne and I and Christy, Dean, Joanne, Christy, my son, my daughters, yes, it will be difficult, but I will walk you through it because I understand it. I'm here. I walk this before you. I go before you. Deuteronomy, when it says God goes before us, do not fear. That became the message. God went before us, and we're not to fear. So when tragedies strike, lean in. Start following Jesus. Take that time. Step back. If you need to go and get professional care, I highly recommend it. Go and do it. Talk therapy is great. And understand that will help you to have a greater understanding. But don't forget, also, talk to God. Cry out to him. Let me tell you something. It helped me tremendously. And it allows me to do this. Here I am, doing a YouTube channel. Here I am, doing a podcast. Because that's what we're about. We're about helping people get through life and life's events as they follow Jesus. It's about being real. It's not about church or Christianese, as I like to say, but instead it's about being real. So there you go. You know what I always say. If you're not following Jesus, start following Jesus today. Stay strong. Be courageous. Be a warrior. And as always, a special shout out to everybody in sobriety. And I always end now in the same way. Brandon, Daddy loves you. Mommy loves you. Christy loves you. We miss you, but we'll see you again. Don't forget, sign up for this YouTube. You can subscribe. Don't forget, check out my other podcasts. That's on podbean.com and on Spotify. And my weekly messages on TikTok at Dean Rothstein and on Instagram at Dean Rothstein. Take care. Love you. And we'll see you again in a week or so.